Today the plan is I'm going to get the fuel tank started on the Bearhawk. That's going to include, for the first time, removing these fuel tanks and actually putting them on the table. But before I do that, we need to get ready to start fabricating some fuel lines, as well as get ready to hook up the fittings into the fuel tank itself. Let's go jump into that today. We just did the lower skin drain there, but you can see there is 1, 2, 3, and back there is a 4th for the fuel gauge that will actually be in the aircraft somewhere right in here. And now what we've got to do is these last 2 ribs right here we've got to drill through. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark where each of these are, and then we're going to get started measuring these items and drilling them. The way I'm going to do this is take the level speed square, drop it over that, and then measure to the center of the hole, right, so maybe just over an inch from the back side here. 1 1/10 of an inch is how far in I'll need to go to mark this hole. So I'm just going to write that straight on to this 1.1 inches to the center. All right, we got everything marked and measured. I've written it just straight on the blue plastic here, just as a reminder. I've double checked, triple checked all of the measurements and the alignments. Now I'm going to actually remove the fuel tank using a 5/32 hex head and drill, because I don't want to do this all day. There are 3 straps that hold the fuel tanks into the bay, and then 2 straps on the upper side that prevent it from running into or rubbing into the upper surface of the wing. I'll reference this several times throughout this video, but the Bearhawk Companion, as of the recording of this video, only has its main tanks. There are no auxiliary tanks in these kits. I'm sure that's a modification that will come down the road, but as of the recording of this video, these are the only tanks I'm removing, or these 2 main tanks right here. I think what I'm going to do, and this is just me because I am not 100% certain how accurate I can get just measuring this with a Starrett ruler and speed square. I think I'm going to drill out the first rib and then actually reinstall the tank, tighten everything back up, verify that I've done it correctly before I do anything to the inboard rib, the one right up against the aircraft itself. So yeah, I think that's my best bet. Let's do that. I drilled the pilot holes using a number 40 drill bit in each location that I had marked after measuring from the lower surface of the wing. I ended up opening up the holes for the 3/8 inch feed line holes that'll go to the engine to 5/8, and then my sight gauge holes I only opened up to 7/16. There are some elastic grommets that came with my aircraft spruce inventory that I then put in these holes to keep the rigid tube from rubbing and chafing against it. Alright, now this is going to be pretty cool because this is the first time I have gotten to use any of the parts themselves. So I'm going to grab my fuel system box here and take it over to the table and dig out the grommets that I need to put in these holes. Alright, so these will go in here. If I have made them the right size, it looks like it's going to be kind of tight. Alright, and then this is the smaller grommet. It goes in the sight gauge for the fuel lines. Alright, so it's Sunday afternoon, and I normally try to reserve those for kind of just doing stuff with family, maybe editing some of this footage. But today the kids are taking a nap, and I don't really have anything in the pipeline pressing to edit. I do have some stuff, but I am working on these wing fuel lines still. I've got the, if you can see it, I've got the grommets all in place, and you can kind of see on the back side there, I cut the 4 holes here on the inboard spar, and I've got the hardware, if I can get this to focus here, I've got the hardware installed here. This is the 824, 924 nut and fuel line fittings. And so I've got those installed, and according to the picture, it says that the nut goes on the outside. I've not tightened that down yet. But that's the next thing I'm working on. One of the issues that I ran into on my inventory was that my kit had been sent the inventory for the aux tanks. These use an 804T rather than the 832 fitting, meaning that I didn't have enough unions to just run the line out to the side port. There's reasons why they do this, but I was able to get that shipped to me from Bearhawk and get it reinstalled later on that week. So on page 6 or 5, whatever I'm on, it says use a speed square to mark this, and something that I just have kind of stumbled on is these bottom 3, which one of them is a side port and the other 2 are just going to go to the engine. The one at the top, which is the top of your side port, I've had kind of a struggle marking here. So what I've been doing is I've been just kind of marking it dead center on the undersurface of the upper wing. And what that's going to allow me to do is to just basically measure how far away from that I need to cut. Just sharp surfaces there. The way that I made sure my step bit, I didn't accidentally drill too far, was I simply took electrical tape and wrapped it around the step bit at the level that I wanted to drill through. That way, once I punctured the skin and drilled it out, I had the visual reference of where I was drilling to. I tried marking this with a Sharpie at first, and it just wasn't visual enough with the bit spinning. So I really like it. It works for me, and I ended up doing it several times through the rest of this build. So something I'm just now seeing and noticing, this outside rib has 2 ribs. It's kind of like a, maybe like the gable on a building, like I know on my hanger here. The last rafter, there's 2 rafters there. So when you're drilling through 2 of these. Well, because you're pushing, the inner one is flexing in and the outer one's kind of cupping. So I have got a couple of little shards of metal that have been stuck between these 2. So make sure you've got a chip chaser that you can use to try to get all that metal out to prevent that from occurring. There is really no good way of going about that. It's going to happen because you've got two pieces of metal side by side. So just be aware of it, and you know, I guess if you're watching this to build one of these, that's just a little tip there. The next page has me fabricating fuel lines, which is why I've got this blue package right here. The fuel lines, which are the rigid lines that you have to cut them yourself, those come in this, you know, at least mine did. They came in this packaging right here. So a couple of quick explanation things. This tubing that I'm getting ready to cut here is 50-52 tubing, meaning that it is a mix of aluminum as well as magnesium and chrome, or chromium. So it has a little bit higher pressure ratings associated with that, meaning that it can be used for fuel lines and some hydraulic applications. Stronger than the 3000 level rigid tubing, which you can't do that with. In addition to that, rigid tube is measured by its outside diameter. So when I'm looking for the ones per the build that I'm doing currently, the 3/8 and the 1/4 inch tubing, that's a measurement for the outside diameter. And now in my case, I need two 14-inch pieces, so I need 28 inches total. So I'm gonna mark, and do not mark with a graphite pen on this pipe. That can actually cause etching problems when I'm marking just past, maybe a 30/2 of an inch past 28 inches here. Make sure I can see that mark. And now the way that this works is, if I were to try to explain every single process that I'm going to do on this build, my build videos would be incredibly long and drawn out. So what I'm planning on doing, and I've already started to do this, is if there's a specific process that I'm showcasing in a video, like you're seeing right here, me cutting pipe and then eventually flaring it, I'm going to have a dedicated standalone video for anyone that's interested in learning that specific process separate from the build videos. So I'll explain what I'm doing and how I'm doing it here, but then over in those dedicated videos, I'll actually show you the process that I use for each of these procedures in case you're simply unfamiliar with it. All right, now I'm going to just briefly test to make sure that these fit on this tubing. You've got a sleeve and a nut that go onto this tubing. The threads for the the threads on the nut should be at the top side just like that right there. I guess my blue jacket's making it hard to see that. But when you have a threaded AN fitting, this will attach to it, again, wrong size, but that will attach to it, and that sleeve, what we're about to do is make a flare with this end to mechanically seal this joint. That's really how rigid tubing works, is it mechanically seals with a sleeve, the soft aluminum sleeve, into this steel hardware right here. It sort of compresses it into it. The hardware that I'm using is aviation grade hardware, which means that it is flared at 37 degrees, and I'm having to use an aviation specific flaring tool shown here to make these flares. To make a flare, you insert the tubing into the flaring tool and then secure it with a wing nut, and then begin to flare it out with the cone in the center. Again, I will be showcasing this in another video on my channel if you're interested in learning that process rather than just watching me go through this portion of my build series. Alright, so I have my flare for my first tube, and I've that one's got one in it. Slide this in, and I've got the sleeve, I've got the nut, and it looks good. So I have to make, let's see, 3 more of this and 4 more of these smaller ones. Now, if I was flaring this and I had a flare on one end, don't forget that you would have to preload all your hardware onto it. So that way when you flared it, it isn't missing that hardware. Ask me how I know that. All right, I'm gonna swap around this to the quarter, which is the other direction, but it doesn't really wanna go that way, so I'm just gonna go all the way around. 1/8 of an inch. There's 1/4 of an inch right there. Just undo that, loosen this, pop this off, open this up, and then you should have a very nicely flared piece. And there's my flare right there. All right, so I'm gonna stick the 2 little ones in here. These are gonna be the main fuel lines. They go all the way through. Assuming that I've lined these up correctly. All right, I'm gonna hit this with a bit of oil, and then we will see if that helps get this on. Just lightly rub it in on my fingers here. Okay, so we've got the fuel lines protruding through. Technically, you don't leave them like this. Actually, this gets pulled off, and I don't think these go back in until final assembly of the wings after they're painted and stuff. So all I'm doing right now is getting ready to do the next page 7, which is fabricate the side port line connection, because this will have to be hooked up and finished. But I need to know where that fuel tank sits so I know how long to make it. So I'm getting ready to fabricate the fuel lines for this one. Unfortunately, the hardware that's supposed to be with this kit hasn't showed up, so I can't really fully do that yet. I'm hoping in the next day or 2 it'll be here. Okay, so we're gonna finish up these fuel tanks today, but before I do, I kinda wanna explain something that happened that is very pertinent if you are using the current version of the build plans. When I got my kit, I did the inventorying like I was supposed to, and I went through the hardware call out, and everything I was receiving was correct for the hardware call out itself. But the problem is there was an error in the hardware call out. The companion does not, as of the recording of this video, have the option to put in aux or auxiliary tanks, the 9-gallon tanks that in the plans you can see are outboard of the main tanks. And for my aircraft, it had hardware included in it, a T that was supposed to be used at the ends of the wings to hook in that auxiliary tank, so that way you could see that fuel was being transferred when you turn on the aux pump. Long story short, I don't need a T, I need a union. And so the hardware call out was incorrect for that. Virgil was very understanding, recognized that that had an inaccuracy in it, so I really appreciate his candidness and professionalism there. Immediately drop shipped me that, and I've got it installed on the wings now. Those are completely finished, we're done with that. And the last thing to do really on this fuel tank fuel line combination are the tanks themselves. And I've already installed some of the fittings here, but let's actually look at and talk about these fittings and how to install them into the tank, and then what you do after that. The plans call for using Loctite 567 for the thread sealer. I was unable to find any of this locally for me, so I ended up going with the Permatex equivalent of that Loctite solution. You install the fuel strainer or the finger filters that go into the fuel tank on each of the locations that are going to run towards the engine. This is the AN816 fuel fittings that will go inside of this. Now these are brass going into aluminum tanks, so just make sure that you do not over tighten this. Once it's snug, it's snug. You're going to bend or collapse the inside of the fitting if you try to bear down on it. That's even more important when you put in the AN fitting that is steel and could cause an issue with that brass fitting on the outside. Make sure you're generous with your pipe sealant. I ended up wiping it off once I got done. This is gonna be a lot easier to add a little bit more right now than to wish you'd added more later when you discover there's a leak. All right, so at this point there's not much left to do on these tanks. They're finished. I've got all of the hardware installed, tightened down correctly. Now I'm going to reinstall the tanks in the aircraft, and just because this video is getting a little long, I'm not going to really show that. I'm just putting it back in, tightening down the straps, and at that point I'm going to take all the fittings, make sure that they line up correctly, and then I will flare the last part of, I'll mark flare, cut off the last part of the fuel fittings inside of the wings themselves. It's gonna be a chore getting the flaring tool inside of the wing root, and just so I don't have to show you the pain of me doing that, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. And this has got us all done with the fuel lines and the fuel tanks, at least in the wings themselves. I don't have the aux tanks. If you are building a Bearhawk that has auxiliary tanks, you'll do that later on in the build, in the wings build. But as of right now, that wraps up my wings fuel system. So I look forward to sharing the next one with you, where we're going to continue working on part of an area just around the fuel tank as we prep for the skin that we prepped in the first video to go back on the aircraft. Have a great rest of your day, and I really do appreciate you watching.